a bit. And I want to turn to somebody who's really been a lodestone for me in how to think about Fukushima, a woman, Yuriko Muto, from Fukushima, who lost her own livelihood because she was living in the foothills of mountains, running a cafe and serving a lot of natural things. She is one of those people who began to oppose nuclear power after Chernobyl. And the reason she did was that she began to study it, and she decided that every stage of generation of nuclear power, from people involved in uranium mining to people who transport it, and all the processes of milling it and enriching it, that somebody is being exposed to radiation every step of the way, and she simply could not condone not opposing that form of power. Now, I was really thrilled to see that Kristen Iverson, in her magnificent book on Rocky Flats, quotes a part of his speech, which was given at the first major gathering. I think electrified everyone because it helped people feel what it was like to live in Fukushima after the disaster. And I'm just going to quote a quick part of it, a short part of it, quickly, and you can find parts of it in the epilogue in Kristen's book, and you can also find the whole speech online translated. Okay, quote, caught between the campaign launched ever so quickly to proclaim our safety on the one hand and our own uncertainty on the other, the ties holding us together have been sundered. In our neighborhoods, our workplaces, at school, and at home, how many of us have suffered and grieved. Like it or not, decisions are pressed upon us every day. To flee or not to flee, to eat or not to eat, it's a series of Hamlet-like questions. To hang out our wash or not to hang it out. To make our children wear masks or not to force them to till our fields or not to till them. To protest to someone, something, or remain silent. All manner of agonizing decisions have confronted us. And these questions are the ones that I think she's to me so helpful because she's not trapped by false divisions. That we have been divided by the forces, by a government that refused to take responsibility, never mind TEPCO itself. And there are people in Fukushima who will say, for all the problems with the Soviet Union, that compulsory evacuation 3 days later is something that could have helped us. It could have helped, for example, in families where the father and mother generation, even the father might have wanted to leave, but the mother-in-law says, no, I've got to stay here. So it could have cut down on some of those intra-family disputes because if the government orders you to leave, you leave. But of course, the government didn't want to pay that much money or take such responsibility. So these divisions that have been produced in Fukushima are overlaid and aggravating what was already an acute economic divide in Japan. Japan, I would say, late 1990s, had the lowest income gap of the G7, or now the G8, the richest countries in the world, between the highest income earners and the lowest. And by 2005, I think it was second only to the United States. And I have read since then that by some indices, inequality in Japan exceeds that of the United States, which is a major achievement, you have to admit, right? To show greater inequality than the United States. And it's tragic because what Japan had achieved post-war was a widespread middle-class society. Now, middle class is not everything, but it's a lot. Okay, so the kinds of divisions between the communities that site plans, house waste, and their interests, economic development, employment, although that has been exaggerated too. It's obviously a factor in the United States as well. Between those places that produce the electricity and those that consume it, this became a very big deal after Fukushima, as Tokyoites, some of them, felt with a pang that the people in northern Japan and Fukushima were not the beneficiaries of this electricity. It was being generated for Tokyoites, but it would be too dangerous to have a nuclear power plant in Tokyo. Between those who can afford relative safety and those who can't. Between those who can buy safe food and those who can't. I'll try to give examples from my direct experience, what people have told me directly. A niece of a friend with a baby was so furious at all the rich people buying up the food grown from Osaka West that she decided she was not going to worry at all. She was just going to eat whatever food she could buy that was affordable. And my friend said, well, what about the babies? She said, oh, the baby's the same too. We're just not going to worry. So not being able to, not having choices can lead to that state of just coming into, she at least had the energy to be angry. You can just become indifferent from your hopelessness. A friend of mine whose husband runs, it's a K through, maybe it's just a middle school through college, and found after Fukushima that so many parents from Fukushima were trying to send middle school-aged children to go to this school, which is in one of the metropolitan prefectures. And the husband would explain that, no, we have a policy that junior high students cannot be living away from their parents. He said, no. We absolutely have to make sure that our children aren't identified with Fukushima so that they won't suffer for employment and marriage prospects. So this I think, is a legacy of Hiroshima, is the marriage issue. And even recently I've seen in the paper reports of Fukushima men complaining that young women don't want to marry them. But a lot of secrecy, victim secrecy, took place after the atomic bombings because people were worried that their children would not be able to get married or be well employed. I once asked a very interesting, wonderful American historian who teaches at the Hiroshima Peace Institute, I asked him, so do you see this kind of phenomenon among Hanford downwinders of worrying about marriage? He says, no, Americans are in such denial about the dangers of Asia that there's no discrimination. I don't know if that's true. I'd be very eager to hear. I think what happens a lot in the U.S. is people worry about property values, right? That seems much more outdated. Don't talk about this because it'll make the property values go down. Whereas marriageability is a huge issue in Japan. Another friend told me that one of his neighbors had her son driving back from Fukushima on weekends, and the neighbors complained about having a car with a Fukushima license plate. Didn't want to be parking, so he offered his own parking lot. There's a single nuclear reactor on the northernmost island of Hokkaido, which is sort of like my second home. And only after Fukushima did I hear that there was a rumor that girls from that area couldn't get married, and I asked a scientist from Hokkaido University whether that was true. He said, well, of course, the cancer rates, breast cancer rates are so much higher in that area than in the eastern part. So these are the kinds of divisions and tensions that are created, and also secrecy among those who have been victimized. Another kind of tension about staying or leaving, of course, who can afford, and recovery. Listening to Robert Chavez and Charmaine Whiteface today and talking about something I knew abstractly but had a new power to me about how contaminated their homelands have become, and yet how they want to continue to make their homelands, because homeland is a meaningful thing, made me think about my own worry and even criticism of people insisting on staying in Fukushima for the sake of staying. And that, even though I know how difficult it is to get up and leave, and I remember screening a film many of you may have seen called The Chernobyl Park a number of years ago, and students were astonished and said, why do these people just leave? And I thought, okay, you're University of Chicago's undergrads, you think that if you decide you don't like a place, you can just up and leave. It's not easy. Not easy. So I'm well aware of that, and I just wish that there were systematic government support for allowing people to move, not just with their children, but their old folk to safer places. But on the other hand, we get campaigns like support the people of Fukushima by eating their produce, right? Support by eating, and it becomes particularly charged when you have organic farmers who have invested so much of themselves into producing safe food, and then it was becoming one of the hallmarks. Like, unlike China, Japan produces safe food. And some have given up, but many want to stay, and they've kind of put all their life's determination into saying, I'm somehow, one way or another, I'm going to produce safe food. And as a great graduate student in sociology, who was one of your servers tonight, has taught me to think about, okay, so supposing that these people can produce food that's safe, that really is safe for consumers, what about them? What does it mean for these organic farmers to be working the soil in the contaminated areas? You know, so we can't just be thinking of the consumers and their safety, although market mentality encourages that. Or, you know, festivals like this in Soma, the 750-year-old festival of chasing the wild horses was revived almost in full scale this year. Now, you think about it, right? These horses, a number of those who were fit enough, were evacuated to Hokkaido in 2011. I guess they come back. Think about, what do horses do when they're running? They kick up dust, right? There's no way you can have horses running along. And you're attracting crowds, and on the one hand, it is energizing for people. It's the sign of this whole discourse of recovery, which the government has promoted like crazy, and local governments too, is one that bothers me immensely because it seems like a version of cover-up. On the one hand. On the other hand, people need to go on living their everyday lives. What is it that will give them the energy to do so? But this kind of reviving athletic meets for students, all of that seems very, very problematic to me. As does support by accepting irradiated detritus rubble, right? I think the city of Osaka just incinerated over 3 days at the end of November. Rubble. And the government, of course, refused to oppose this, was made to seem like a NIMBY reaction, not in my backyard. But I don't think it is. What happens if you spread this green rubble all over Japan and incinerate it with varying filters or not, is you're making no place safe in Japan. There's no place even to send children once you do this thoroughly enough, and I think that's a deliberate part of the government, act on the part of the government, by saying it's unpatriotic, you're not showing solidarity, but it is also tacitly saying, look, the whole archipelago is now contaminated. You have no choice but to live with it. Of course, no one's going to say this, and I will not in any way be able to tolerate it. But this is what's happening. So I'm thinking, this was a very amazing example to me. A friend told me that her nephew, who had evacuated to another part of northern Japan, gone back to start high school, has been instructed by his school to go to school. He commutes to school on a bicycle wearing a disposable raincoat. This is a school rule. He gets to the school, removes the raincoat. The way home, he gets a new disposable raincoat that he wears going back to school. What's being done to these raincoats, with all these students wearing a set every day? Why is it considered acceptable to have children going to school in those circumstances? But that is, in another of those handy words that habituate us to a situation, the new normal. So I think the not wanting to know, the not wanting to acknowledge ourselves as victims is also a part of being caught off guard. It's a kind of it's alienation from oneself. It's keeping a profound part of yourself secret to yourself. And in the midst of all this, I'm going to finish up with this, so if you want discussion, you can have a little bit of it. On the one hand, sometimes I feel as if Fukushima had never happened, even in Japan, the way the restart of the Oi reactor over what is now widely acknowledged to be an active fault. All of that, and then the very loud voice that the economic interests have, the dire predictions about what will happen. And because Japan, you see, has been in this 20-year post-bubble recession, the claim about what will happen to unemployment if we give up on nuclear power is very powerful.